All right, why don't we get started? I'm Robert Harley, editor of the Absolute Sound, and this is Meet the Editors. I'd like to thank all of you for coming to the show and coming to our session here. We have a panel of distinguished audio journalists, and I'd like to have them introduce themselves, starting.
Dave Clark, Positive Feedback.
Yes, David Robinson, Editor-in-Chief of Positive Feedback.
Neil Gader, Associate Editor of Absolute Sound, Robert Harley's sidekick.
John Atkinson, Editor of Stereophile magazine.
So we're going to open it up to you guys for questions. You can ask us about anything about magazines or products or technology or how we choose products for review or the reviewing process. And so we'd like to kick it off.
Don't be shy.
I'm sure someone has a question. Okay.
So I have a question about just ad placement, because I'll buy an issue of a magazine and I'll see reviews for certain equipment, and then I'll see ads for that equipment. You know, the same magazine, sometimes positioned close to where the review is. Is there any type of coordination in ad placement in publishing reviews, or is it all handled completely independently?
It's completely independent, except that we never have an ad within a review for that product. So if that happens by chance, then we'll move it. But there's no coordination. But sometimes that happens by accident, and then we'll change it.
Yeah, same with Stereophile. The ad department and the editor are completely different. In fact, the ads are actually in El Segundo, south of Los Angeles, and we're in New York. There's a stage in the magazine's production where we finally see every page and where the ads fall. And that's our opportunity to then move ads if an ad for a product is in a review of that same product. That's when we move them around. So we try hard to prevent that happening. Sometimes it slips through, and it tends to be when it's a dealer ad. And you'll have a dealer, and it'll be identified on the computer screen as just, I don't know, listen up. But we don't see the ad itself, so we don't know what products are being mentioned in that ad. And sometimes there will be some conflict, which we can't avoid.
I don't see the whole magazine with all the ads until really about 3 days before it goes to the printer.
Right. In online publication, it's a little different because you have some of your ads can be statically placed. I mean, they're placed, they're given traditional placement like we would have in a magazine. Others are on a dynamic rotation, and so they're going to pop in and out of various places, and that's just randomly done. So there's no attempt to place an ad deliberately next to the review.
But the manufacturer will know that they provided something for review, and they'll have an approximate idea of what it will appear. And I assume that sometimes the business office, independent review, will say, hey, well, you got something in for review, how about buying an ad?
Yeah, I don't see that's a problem. I mean, we do have a rule that, we send every manufacturer of a product review a preprint, and we say, this is for your information, this is for you to let us know if there's any factual errors, and for you to write a comment. But we say, you cannot quote from this review until the next issue is on the newsstands. And manufacturers, 99.99% honor that. So they can't, even though they know the review is in that issue, they can't quote from it.
They'll just buy a big ad.
Yeah, that's freedom of speech.
Right, of course.
Yeah, I think it's the thing that we all try to avoid is the quid pro quo. That's where you run into a problem where, okay, we're purchasing a result, we're purchasing preference, and so forth. That's true corruption. The rest of it is simply, of course, somebody who's producing a product has an interest. They want to be close. They want to be in the issue. They want to know that they're going to be there. And I've never had a problem with that.
One thing I should just add, and that is, occasionally, and it's rare, a manufacturer, distributor, they might call the reviewer and ask him how he's doing. They might make suggestions. They might just kind of encourage him to go in this direction, emphasize those things. And that is discouraged in the most strong terms by the editors. And when that happens, usually they'll talk to me and I'll say, would you report this to Robert immediately. Tell them who called you, who emailed you, what they tried to do, and Robert handles it from there.
Do you normally interview the manufacturer before you start writing the review, or at some point through the review, or do you prefer to stay virgin to any input from the manufacturer? I know that's not quite the same as I think what you just answered.
Well, when I started out reviewing, and John was my editor, one of the first things he said, and I'll never forget this, he says, contact with the manufacturer should be through a diode. Information flows in only one direction.
Yeah, the reviewer needs to be as fully informed about the product as possible. But that doesn't mean that, you then acts as an unpaid consultant to the manufacturer.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you get something and there's an issue with it, you might want to say, I turned it on and it blew up. It's normal.
Yeah.
Should it really be smoking, after 30 minutes?
Talk about how you get products to review. You pay for your products, you're going to get them from the manufacturer, right, or a distributor.
They're all provided by the manufacturer distributor.
That's a business model question. Clearly, no business enterprise has the budget to go out there and start purchasing. That's the Consumer Reports model, and they have a very good reason in their whole model for doing that. But the problem is that unless you've got an enormous budget, I mean enormous, you can't afford to do it. So most of the time, we have, as members of the community, a real friendly relationship. We get to know people. We go to these shows so that we can look around, like you, and try to find interesting products, something that catches our ear. And after that, you just simply work out the standard terms. We all have policies for how we handle reviews and how things are. We use a database to track who's got what, and then at the end of the review, it's going to go back. And we have the manufacturer pay for shipping both here and away. And I tell them, this product is at risk. If you're sending me a review product, we're harmless, because if that thing blows up or it gets stolen or whatever, I mean, that happens the brakes. So to keep it insured, and that keeps the burden where it should be on the manufacturer. This is part of your participation.
And it's part of their marketing too, because the manufacturer wants press, they want the product out, so they realize, this is another form of advertising to get their product out there and talked about and reviewed in multiple publications saying, similar things.
I have some simple questions. We are having more and more difficult time to read because of the small print size. How you overcome that, especially stereophile. I often sound a little bit better, but stereophile is terrible.
On the computer, you control and you magnify the text, so it's easier on the...
I guess we have to, like an iPad or something.
Well, we do electronic editions, and you can zoom out the text on those. The problem with printing on paper these days is that paper is increasingly expensive. And it's a compromise for typeface and spacing we choose, to get the most in an economically viable package.
I guess it's the best way would be computer, right?
Well, as I said, about 15% of Stereophile circulation is now electronic on Apple Newsstand and Senior editions.
How about full sound? Do you have that?
Yeah, we have iPad, and we have you can download a PDF or an iPad app. So that's a great way to get the magazine too. By the way, my other magazines that I read, I've converted more and more to an iPad app, and I like reading magazines on iPad.
Another one. I just spend a good deal of money to have an audio and video system, whole thing. I'm an opera buff, but now I'm going to like a Metropolitan Opera, Blu-ray DVD, rather than buying a pure audio. Don't you think it's a matter of survival? You guys now have to include something about the video part?
Well,
I read the 3 magazines, Home Theater, Oxford Sound, and Stereophile, and I tend to now, first magazine I'm going to read is more of Home Theater because there's audio and video in it.
Well, we have a video magazine, Home Theatre, which is associated with us, and if it's video, it goes to Home Theatre magazine. If it's audio, it comes to us. That's how we divide it up.
How awful sound? There's this melody I respect very much. Do you think you may have to do something along, just like buying a Sony 4K TV, which I just bought? You just cannot go back to the audio only. You like to have a video part in it.
Well, we do some reviews of software, Blu-ray software, mostly of classical performances and opera. So we have reviews of those.
Yes, I do.
But we don't do hardware reviews of video. The readers would scream.
Okay, I'll call for
My mailbox would be flooded.
On many of the reviews, they're in the stratosphere in terms of the product price. $50,000 amplifiers recently, and although they look absolutely spectacular, those are the crowds. You know, most of us can't simply afford it. And then whenever anyone writes into all three of the magazines to complain, and then there's suddenly a very low budget, like sub-1 or something.
No, that's not true at all. It's not suddenly a low budget.
Okay, it's always been planned.
All the magazines do a balance of price.
Right, but so my first point is, I'd really like to see more in the middle range, say, more products. And I know there are a lot out there because I see them at the shows, from 82 to 10 or 15 range. And the other point is, in terms of review coverage, one thing I found especially valuable was, I know Stereophile had a musician on staff who played for the National Symphony one. And I found their music reviews and their take on how they perceived the sound to be really valuable, because they were explaining as a musician, and some of their story was about how they interacted with other musicians and how it was like playing in a symphony and stuff. I'm wondering if any of that will come back, maybe even a rock and roller or somebody like Billy Barrett, who seems to be interested in it or something like that.
Well, you know, with one or two exceptions, everybody on Stereophile staff is a musician. I mean, we just don't go around with a flag saying I'm a musician. But if you read the reviews, you will see references to it.
Yeah, you know, I'm a guitarist myself. An awful lot of the people in audio, there's an absolute divide between audiophiles and musicians. I mean, a lot of musicians who are into it don't know audio. I mean, they're listening to clueless equipment. But there's a pretty significant percentage of people who are deeply into music on our staff, I know. And I think that's generally true. John's a bassist. I've been playing guitar since I was in high school. So there's a sensibility, there's an aesthetic there that understands music, that loves music because we do it.
Yeah. I'd like to address you're saying that we review stratospherically priced equipment, and then, you know, when we're accused of that, we review some budget
I
stuff.
was being unfair.
Right, but I mean, it's peculiar, but Robert did an analysis of his magazine a few issues back, and we've done the same thing. The actual balance is pretty much covers the entire range of price, from very cheap to very expensive. But the perception is, I think, that if we review a $100,000 pair of loudspeakers, and that outweighs 5 or 6 other reviews of more affordable price loudspeakers.
Probably because that $100,000 is on the cover.
Yeah, well,
And I know that's an art.
I mean, we put things on the cover to sell magazines on newsstands, and you sell more magazines by putting car magazines by putting a Ferrari on the cover than you do a Hyundai.
Yeah.
People need headphones on the cover, just like the
Well, yeah, I mean,
Well, there's a trend too amongst designers, the companies. We can't dictate to the companies the price points, and what drives this is not the magazines. What drives this are mega millionaires who are out there, and the wealthy in various places that they let the manufacturers know directly. I want something that's like this. It's what Thorsten Veblen used to call conspicuous consumption, and if you are in that price point, you will let them know directly what you will buy, and they will make it for you. We don't. We're just they're not responding to us.
and manufacturers really want to be exposed at their best. I mean, in our next issue of Stereophile, I review the YG Sonia 1.3, which is $106,800. This review came about for some years. I've been trying to get to review the company's smallest speaker, the Keepo. But they were very nervous. No, we want you to review our best ever speaker. And I'm saying, no, I want one actually which people can afford and will fit in my room. And so we had this standoff for like nearly 3 years of what I wanted to review and what they wanted Stereophile to cover. And in the end, they had the new Sonia at CES, and I really thought it was fine. So I said, okay, I'll review the Sonia.
There's a constant struggle with manufacturers. They always want the most expensive thing reviewed, and we want to review the less expensive products. They want to be perceived as having the flagship in the magazine because they don't get that many opportunities to be in print.
Is it ever possible to review like 2 or 3 speakers from a manufacturer at the same time?
Yeah, but then, we only have room for so many products in an issue. That gives that manufacturer a real birthday present. But 30% of our coverage will be from him.
Well, it's from the standpoint of marketing, it's branding. Your flagship product is what establishes your reputation and your brand. And eventually we'll get the trickle down. But from their standpoint, the most important thing is to get brand identification well established in the marketplace. If they are selling products in those price ranges, they want to be considered one of the best in the world, if not the best. And so the dynamic is really not one that's controlled by the magazines. We're simply reporting what's out there.
The top end of the market is very robust. It's surprising how much of this really, really expensive stuff gets sold around the world.
I had an engineer call me, and he lamented the fact that his flagship product is around $25,000, and he said it's too expensive in this market. It's the best that they've done, and it's an absolutely fabulous product. But he feels that he's probably going to be forced into a situation to produce a $50,000 or $75,000 speaker, even though, except for the size of the room that it will have to be in, it won't be appreciably better. It'll just be bigger, and it will attract the big spenders with all the bling. So.
But then you have the extreme. I know John's reviewed the little Pioneers that Andrew's come out with, which are used upstairs in one room, and of course the next room is state-of-the-art T.H.E. with all the electronics, and it's just kind of cool to see that range of what he's able to accomplish.
Well, that's a really good room to go see, by the way, because that little Pioneer, the BS22s, the little I think it's the A20 integrated amp for $299, and Elite, I think it's the N50.
Yeah, I'd like to see that system downstairs, someplace where it's more visible to everybody. That this is a great entry. This sounds. Because I was in there and people are like, this shouldn't sound this good. At this price, we shouldn't be hearing this.
Don't tell your wives that the sound is available at that price.
Well, one thing that we do that's a little bit different than what Bob and John do is, and this is a policy and philosophy level decision, is we have done reviews of DIY and modded products where actually you take a product and you hot rod it and so forth. And there's a vigorous market for that. People who still play with soldering irons or want somebody else to do it. We do reviews of those, and that's part of the way that we address the question of what are all the options out there for audiophiles. Some of them really do like playing with the gear and tweaking it.
You reminded me of the audiophile joke. The audiophile's nightmare, but he dies and his wife sells all his equipment for what he told her he paid for it.
Probably true.
This gentleman in the back.
I just more basic question. I'm wondering what between you, the different your publications, what's the philosophical and editorial policy differences that distinguish each of you?
That's a very.
You can go first, John.
Stop the panel.
Next question.
Well,
Maybe here's another one. I just always wonder something about myself, about reading the reviews and the publications, which I enjoy, but I can tell you I'm I might like music, but I'm not really technically driven. And I often wonder, is it something about me that makes it hard to interpret how much you do like it? Sometimes you hear somebody, another writer is very categorical, that they love it. But in fact, most of the equipment reviews I find, you love it. And so I say, well, gee, I know I have to go out and listen to it and do all those things, but I'm just wondering, are there reviews where you don't like it? And am I supposed to be reading these reviews in a certain way? Are there certain techniques that I should be addressing in my focus on?
I mean, like reading between the lines?
Yeah, or whatever. Yeah, whatever you tell me. I just find that the reviews are all very
Well,
nice.
it comes from what David said, that, you know, we're looking for products that we want to enjoy listening to. So we go around shows, we visit dealers, and if we see and hear something that sounds pretty awful, unless we were masochistic, why would we ask for a review sample? And so we are tending to cherry pick what all of us write about, because we're fans. We want to enjoy what we do.
So you're not going at it cold.
No, we're not going for a statistically normal distribution of review samples.
That's right.
of everything that's out there. We are looking for what gets our juices flowing.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, you know, the difficult reviews to write are where you have a product where it doesn't appear to do anything wrong, but you really don't enjoy listening to it.
Mm-hmm.
And that becomes a real labor, because you have to explore, is it system synergy? Is there something wrong with the product? Is it, you know, just, this product is incompatible with my taste in music.
Right.
You know, and that becomes a long, drawn-out process. And that review, you know, those reviews are very difficult to write.
Well, this is where nuance comes into play. As John says, quite rightly, most of us go to these shows, like you do, to find where the gold is, not where the gold ain't. We're not interested in rooms, synergies, and the like, where even under show conditions, I'm not really interested. That sounds not for me. Because there are varieties of philosophies and design approaches that are in play. So I think we go, and like you, we find candidates. Our guys, every one of us have people here who are circulating and listening. And that's how we produce a list of what we're going to approach people about reviewing. Now, when we get something in our room, where a synergy is now in play, now it's not here into the show conditions, it's in my room, what I've found is quite often, if something's really rotten, it's probably not going to get in my room in the first place. If it's get there and rotten, I'm going to send it back without comment, because I have to respect the fact that I can really genuinely hurt somebody for reasons that have nothing to do with their product by saying, this really sucks. No, instead, assuming that something's happening, the challenge as a writer is to present a judicious review, something that does illustrate strengths, something that is very honest. I have to be transparent about what moves me. Here's what my room's like. Here's what it looks like. We post all the rooms of all the reviewers so you can see. And then at the end, I have to have the art to be able to say. And this is where writing, this is the professional level. I have to be eloquent enough as a writer to explain in a way that you can see clearly. I see. These were the things you liked. These were the things that weren't so strong. These were the caveats. And after that, none of us can answer a question that only you can answer, which is it worth it? Is that what attracts me? Do I need a rave every time? If you need a rave every time before you're even going to bother, you may want to rethink whether you aren't being a little bit too critical about what you're looking for.
The review should be a starting point for your own listening, not the conclusion or not this is the product to buy. It should be read as this is a product that you should check out for yourself, that we find to be of merit, and you should investigate on your own. A review is just one person's opinion in one system. It's educated and informed opinion, but it's still one person's opinion.
Where I think the currency is being devalued, and accepting present company where we were all long-established publications or web-based publications. But currency is being devalued by web reviewers who are so happy that a manufacturer lent them a product for a review that they just write a rave regardless of a product's actual quality. And so you see an increasing number of rave reviews from reviewers I've never heard of products which, even if they're worthy, are not deserving of that over-the-top praise. And I think the currency becomes devalued. Certainly I think it makes it harder for us then. The relationship between the manufacturer becomes very difficult because, as one manufacturer explained to me when I was asking for a review sample, and he said no, because I got this rave review from dingbat.com. He said, anything you say will not be as favourable as that. So you will actually damage my sales if you review it at all. Let alone, even if you gave it a good review, it still would damage sales compared to the over-the-top rave I've already got. So, okay, right, you don't want to send us for review, that's fine.
Right. In higher education, there's what we call grade inflation.
Yeah.
And in reviewing, there's what we call rave inflation. There are, in my opinion, there are too many people who I don't know either, and I'm pretty mellow and I'm pretty open and I don't know them. We've all been doing this for a long time. And they're raving about things that I've heard, and I know this is good. It's not great. It's not the greatest thing ever. And by the way, you don't know how to write.
Well, the giveaway is count how many times they say I and me, and if it exceeds 10 in the first paragraph.
Exactly. Well, and or I'll tell you, example of a word that has been absolutely denuded of any meaning is awesome.
Not so good.
Okay,
Awesome.
God is awesome. Okay, everything after that, okay. And as soon as we start employing Valley Girl prose to describe what's going on, that's a voice, and it has a place, especially in music reviewing. I think there's a place where some of the stuff that tends to be more direct, more current generation. I get it. There's a connection, but that's an aesthetic and a deliberate choice. If everything you're doing sounds like Valley Girl, and if you don't have that ability, John and I have talked about this, if you don't have the ability to really, if you don't know what the word nuance means, if you never heard of it, well, there's already a problem. The way I look at it is the reviewing process involves two things. One is impression and one is expression. Impression involves my sensibilities. Am I well enough educated? Robert's very good term. Am I well enough educated? Have I put in the time to know what excellence is? The other part, however, is, am I gifted enough as a writer to be able to express that mystery that happened within me? Because impression, that's known to me and God. For you to know about it, I have to have the ability to put that into words, to incarnate that. And if you have a vocabulary, a total vocabulary of 400 or 500 words, and I and awesome and a few other things are it, then not only you're not helping you guys, you're not helping us either, because it makes our job a lot harder.
That's an awesome response.
I think so.
That sort of leads into the question I have, which is, in a lot of the articles, because I do read home theater, Stereophile, Absolute Sound, the whole question of education / trying to excite the younger listener, because we've heard the comments, well, I don't have grey hair, but the comments that so many people here are grey hair old men. So to me there's a disconnect between, most magazines have a lot of reviews. I know Absolute Sound has a fair amount of what I would call educational articles, Stereophile to an extent. What is the plan to be able to have this continuation of people who enjoy this? So the whole concept of bringing back young people, because from the time you get interested in this world, it's Stereophile, Absolute Sound, you're all the leaders. Is there any plans to try to excite via education? In other words, instead of 70% of the magazine being reviews, maybe a little bit more that educates somebody new? why does this sound good? How come it sounds good? I know it's the whole concept of being subjective and it's one person's review over the other, but it's still that whole education. I know a lot of articles have been done about the different versions of digital sound, how to get your computer.
Well, the thing is that the main reason people buy our magazines is for reviews. So we can't. So what I'm saying is, what we have done is create a section on our website called Audiophile Essentials, where you have all the information you're looking for and talking about. Because otherwise, if we ran it in the magazine, we would replace reviews and people would not read us as much. That's just
And what age group?
an age group. Then I think we can't. We're old guys. We can't dress ourselves up in, with tattoos and mohawks and try and appeal to young people ourselves. But what we can do is publish comment and publish writings by writers who are of that generation.
Right.
And that's what we're doing.
Yeah, if we published basic type articles on a regular basis, the existing readership would think that's a waste of space that could have been used for reviews. And that's one of the reasons I wrote The Complete Guide to High-End Audio in 1994, and an introductory guide to high-performance audio in 2007 was to bring this technology and access to connecting to music through a high-performance system to a larger audience.
Well, I mean, and remember too that the magazines, the various publications can only do so much. Where a lot of the evangelism, we're talking audio evangelism, is going to happen when the next generation is right out there. What are you doing to welcome in a younger generation? What do they see? I mean, is your listening room door open? Do you have a listening room that has one chair in it? Are you actually actively seeking to inculcate that in the next generation? I mean, we can certainly help. Robert's book is terrific. John's right. We bring newer writers, younger writers aboard. I get complaints about some of my writers from some of my other writers who say, what in the heck are you doing publishing this punk? And my reaction is making sure that we're here in 5 years. That's what I'm doing. Okay?
But we've been joined by Jacob Heilbrunn from the Absolute Sound.
Thanks, Robert.
We still have another question.
Yeah, there are two things that I wish the audiophile publications would do more of. One is cover secondary market use. I mean, there's a huge use market, and there are some tremendous values to be found. I know that I think Stereophile may have done an article on like vintage Fisher tuners a while back. I wish that was the kind of thing where you had a regular column kind of highlighting some real values, because there are some products like amplifiers or preamplifiers where, yes, there's been development and improvement over time, but it might be different than from digital where you have things becoming obsolete within a matter of years. But I don't see that. I understand that you're not going to get advertising by shining attention on products that are no longer
I don't.
made.
That is a complete red herring.
But so little
Nothing of what we do is governed by the need to attract advertising specifically.
Why is there so little coverage of vintage?
Because, well, all magazines, not just video magazines, their focus is always on the new. Whether it's cars or fishing or whatever, it's always on the new, because that's where the leading edge of our passion is. Now, what we've done on Stereophile, and it's been a personal project of mine for the last 15 years, is to try to get every review we've ever published on our website. So if you're offered a second-hand audio research SP10 preamp, you can go to our website and read our original reviews and our follow-up reviews. So that's one way we're dealing with that.
And that's the best way to do it. Hard disks are cheap. One thing that we published, Positive Feedback was published for 13 years in paper and ink. There's a massive discipline that goes with paper and ink. When you are printing your publication, you're looking at every square inch. I played the font game that John was commented on there with John, how big, because I increased the font so that I make some people happy. I just lost a certain percentage of capacity. I mean, it's a zero-sum game. The blessing of the internet is that hard disks are cheap, The cloud's out there. We can archive every issue we've ever done is online in positive feedback, every single one of them, and we've got a Google search that will bring it up for you.
But people who've been reviewing products for 25 years are in a much better position than somebody like me to say, look, looking back, these are some products that I think have stood the test of time.
One thing I wanted to do, but
maybe like a regular column.
one thing I've wanted to do, but it hasn't been practical, is the equivalent of vertical tasting in wine, where you say take the last 10 audio research preamps, and you just compare them against each other. But it would be great to do that, but it's very resource intensive.
Yeah, research.
The other-
the best amplifiers over history. There was like a 10 best.
That's right, yeah, we do that on a periodic basis where we pick the most significant amplifiers. It's not always the best sounding, but the most significant in terms of it introduced a new technology. It sold in enormous numbers, like the NAD 3020 integrated amp, for example, or it changed the direction of the industry. So we do that with different product categories, and it's a very popular feature.
Yeah. We for a while we started running full reviews of vintage products as Vogue and new, and it stopped because we found that the whole issue of provenance was a real problem.
Yeah.
That you have an Advent speaker. Well, has it been recombed? Does it have the original crossover components? And we've actually found out that finding pristine examples of vintage equipment that you could do that with is actually getting to be impossible. Because everything has been modded, everything has been repaired, so we let that fade away. And then instead, Art Dudley has been focusing on restoring old equipment in his column. And that's been very popular.
Yeah. The other thing was reviewing systems as opposed to individual components. I think Absolute Sound maybe every so often they'll have like, they'll ask their writers to come up with a system within a particular price range. And I know that when I read a review, I look at the components it was used with, but do you see any value including as part of your review if you're reviewing an amplifier? So just, well, here's a preamp that seems to go very well with that particular.
Yeah, I always do that. Because I believe for many, many years that system synergy is enormous. I mean, we're actually commenting on a system in a room with an electrical power grid. I mean, that's what we do. So it's a constant in our magazine. Here's the whole envelope. And I never review a component in isolation. I don't know anybody who does.
No. The problem with reviewing systems is, it's very difficult to recommend a system if you haven't actually tried that system and optimized every component within it. And that is a very resource-intensive process. And you may well be able to do 5 individual reviews of components in the same time, which is what, as I keep going back to, that's what people want to read.
Well, I've got the MBL reference system in my room right now, and I'm going to be reviewing the MBL reference system. And this is
Really? You have the Extreme?
no, not the Extreme.
The 101?
No, but I visited the Extreme system in CES in order to hear it, because I had the reference system in my room and I wanted to understand the differences, which have to do with scale. That article is going to be published very shortly. But this is the second time I've had the reference system in my room. Let me tell you that you wouldn't believe the logistics between the system I had in my room, which was a complete system in 2008, versus getting the same system in my room in 2012 to be able to do here's what I heard then, here's what I'm hearing now. And I went and listened. I paid money to fly down and listen to the Extreme so that I could understand the difference. Well, what'll come out of it will be very valuable, but it has taken from 2008 until 2013 to complete the process. So the logistics of some of the great ideas you're sharing, we're the guys who have to deal with the logistics.
Yeah, I think probably all of us would agree that we hate shipping companies and truckers. A typical story out of my life, which nobody knows about, no one cares, except it becomes... So, I have this huge speaker in 2 300-pound crates. And the trucking company, as they always say, they're like the cable guy. It's like, when will you be here? Between 8 and 6. Can you narrow it down? No, because, even though it's being shipped by a major shipper, like ABF or something, it's the local truck which is going to pick it up from you and take it to their depot. So I talking to the company and, well, these are 200-300 pound crates. Will the truck have a lift gate? Oh yes, it'll have a lift gate. I said, will it have a pallet jack? One of those wheel dollies. Oh yeah, no problem. And so anyway, when will you be here? We can promise you we'll be here by midday. So midday comes. I call. Well, the guy's on the road and he should be with you by 2. He finally turns up at 7:30 that night. It's raining. The truck has a lift gate, but it's broken. And he doesn't have a pallet jack. So
You forgot to say working lift gate.
yes. So I have a sloping driveway. So he backs his truck into the driveway. So now, the driveway's like that and the truck's like that. And so I said, he has a ramp. He says, yeah, I have a ramp. So we can take the ramp out onto the driveway and then we can push the crates, the 300-pound crates up the ramp, or along the ramp, which will be horizontal. So I said, great. He says, the ramp's locked and I don't have a key to the padlock. So it's raining. It's 7:30 at night in winter. I'm lying on my back under this guy's truck with a hammer and coal chisel breaking the padlock to get the ramp out. And I'm thinking, I bet the readers would love to take part in this.
I wish we could write this up. I think it would be funny because it would help you to understand that there are a lot of logistics.
There are. Tyler?
I know it's not the primary or secondary purpose of what you guys do, but somewhere along the line, you definitely have huge influence on the industry with your opinion, simply a wave of the hand. I'm curious how you consider wielding that power that you have, and how you look at a marketplace and consider that you have some ability to influence what happens in that marketplace by what you do, and how do you play that card?
That is almost like a Jedi Knight version of the audio magazines. I mean, is there a quantifiable way to measure the influence of the publications or of the webzines?
No, we're all subjectivists here. We don't need to quantify it. I'm just curious. Do you try to influence for good the industry as a whole in certain ways?
Well, as a reviewer, just writing the reviews, no. I'm just getting the equipment and assessing it. And I'm not trying to move the marketplace or... No, I don't think so. Maybe the magazine's mission, I don't think it's wrong if it's trying to improve the health of the audio industry. But as far as the reviewers are concerned, at least as far as I'm personally concerned, I don't see myself as wielding enormous influence. I see it as introducing a product or trying to draw some attention to it. But whether that's really going to persuade someone to jump on it, I'm skeptical.
I think it is our responsibility to point out trends, though. To identify those trends, not necessarily to become big boosters of the trend, but just to make it clear that there does appear to be some changes in direction. That portable devices, iDevices, headphones, headphone amps. I mean, all that stuff. Not that I'm trying to pander to you right now, but the point is that these things are growing, and I think we kind of talked about earlier about getting new generations interested. We can't look at their proclivities, their interests, and say, well, you know what, they don't jibe with what we've always considered classical high-end audio to be, so we're going to simply ignore those folks. We have to take what they're doing seriously and find a way to migrate our tastes and values, their tastes and values, and kind of come to a place in the middle. I mean, I think in some ways we are custodians of this great passion, this great hobby, and there is responsibility that goes along with that.
The reviewer only needs to be aware of that, of moving markets, to the extent that he needs to be sure that he got it right. And he was fair to the product, and that his conclusions are thoroughly researched. And but not take it into account about how it might affect the marketplace?
Well, I think that one thing we do, there's no collective. I mean, we're all colleagues. It's collegial. We don't get together and make plans. But we do all tend to do things like, for example, support good events like this one. We'll get behind them. We'll help to market that sort of thing because we think it's really good for the group. And I think if we do what we do well, everyone benefits. I strongly believe that. But beyond that, I think what we end up with is like most of life. It's just the outcome of a whole bunch of individual decisions that we all champion the ethical, the professional, quality stuff. And I think if we behave in this way, and if we encourage that in our writers and in our publications and in our contacts with industry, I think that helps culture. That's part of our legacy to culture.
Yeah, I mean, we're all individually, we're like writing messages in bottles and throwing the bottles in the sea. That's all we can do. Where those messages end up and where the bottles wash up, who knows? I mean, I'm sometimes surprised that feedback and, well, this review of yours, had a big effect. Oh, really? I don't see why. When another review I did, which I was much more proud of, seemed to have no effect at all on anything.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
Two questions that are I think, a little bit closely related. How often do you find yourselves within your own staff reviewing pieces of gear that there are really substantially different opinions within your own groups about where somebody might have really written a significantly different opinion about the piece of gear? Secondly, in a show like this, you're going around and evaluating gear for review, and how often are you really later, do you find that you didn't pay attention or just something didn't click then, or you later listen and you say, this is a really great piece of gear that I just didn't realize I saw at the time, different place, different feeling about the gear?
Well, I think it's, addressing your last question first, I think it's good when magazines can kind of cover a show like this with various writers from the staff, because everyone kind of weighs in together. We'll have an editorial meeting, and different writers who attended will send us kind of wish lists, impressions, things like that. So if I, for example, listened to speaker X and just kind of walked away, not particularly, enervated by it, we might get a couple other writers who just said, man, we just love this product, and could we consider reviewing it? So in a way, we kind of check one another to make sure that ultimately not too much falls through the cracks.
On your first question, tends to be a lot of consensus amongst writers, not just for one magazine, within one magazine, but overall. I mean, we all have the same ears, we all listen to music, and we all basically can tend to agree on the macro aspects of a product's performance. I mean, where we will differ is if we really like it or not. I mean, if you read my reviews, you'll know that I'll happily sacrifice 1 or 1.5 or perhaps even 2 octaves of deep bass extension if I can get mid-range purity and sound staging accuracy. And another reviewer will say, well, yes, I agree with you on how that product sounds, but I can't recommend it because I need that full range extension. And that's, I think, a valid disagreement. But we will still agree on the what it is.
There are some divides that'll happen along the lines of tubes versus solid state preferences. SETs for a long time drove some very powerful opinions for very cogent reasons. And that comes down to taste. I can tell you that positive feedback, we've had some very lively kinds of discussions, including emails that were fairly radioactive that would show up in my box, about disagreeing vehemently with something or wondering why somebody would bother, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I think on the whole, John is right. I think that we generally know when we put together, if you put together a recommended component list, I can look at the list and I can say, yeah, I mean, I don't spend a lot of time looking at top lists at either T.H.E or Stereophile and saying, I would disagree. We don't do recommended component lists because it's, for us, it's sort of an ongoing thing. If you want to know what we recommend, just keep reading the magazine. But the fact is that there is a good deal of debate that goes on behind the scenes. If we could publish everything that was happening amongst our people, you'd see this is a lively group and quite often cantankerous, which is good because it means that we keep ourselves honest through real critical discourse.
Well, I have several colleagues at T.H.E who regard some of the products that Robert and I are enthusiastic about with horror. So I think there is a lot of passion there.
All right, well, we're out of time. Thanks, everyone, for
Apocalypse Now, the horror.
Oh, yeah, really? Howdy. You're what? How are you? Nice to meet you. Thanks, guys. See Is that right? I saw yesterday.
That's what it's about. This is the first time I've heard that you guys do pithy remarks from the audience. Yeah, I see. Yeah, maybe you leave those car pictures come with you bet. Okay, let's see what's sexy. Did you go a little bit? Go the cards out there. Yeah, of course. I own one. That's right. Do you own a fancy car? No, I can't be It's $65,000, which rare excursion.
I was going to say, if you're a city dweller, you really even need it.
No, but definitely like the state, you know, see what the house country.
But I mean, I was playing something. Yeah, you know, how you notice something. I usually
I see people more in the media. Yes. Say no more.
Yeah, it's not about me. No, it's about the subject. The subject is coming on.
Yeah, no question. That's why everybody's trying to get into it. Yeah.
No, I am. If you ever want to say my product, hey, thank you. Okay.
Mr. Edelberg.
Send me a secret?
I did. I've been looking forward to jumping your bones for a long time.